Good morning, everyone. We're so thrilled to have so many of our dear friends from local governments across Central Florida, folks working in transportation departments, as well as other allies in this important space. We were thrilled under the leadership of President Joe Biden to pass the infrastructure law and ensure that over the next 5+ years, we'll be able to invest in America and upgrade infrastructure across Central Florida and the nation, whether it's the expansions in I-4, a $2.5 billion project going from 528 down to 27, whether it's hundreds of millions going to Orlando International Airport, Point Santa Parkway, as well as a future expansion of Sunrail Brightline. We're seeing the infrastructure law reshape Central Florida to help fix the traffic in our fast-growing area. It's also been huge for upgrading our ports, including Cape Canaveral, just near here. Water projects have also been critical, including removing lead pipes from so many areas across Florida. We expect that to start taking place after the state does their final plan in October of this year. Of course, broadband is also being created across rural areas of our district and across the state, as well as resiliency among our electrical grid. So many things this touches upon, and the fixing of brownfields in Florida as well. So I want to thank Coral Torres Cruz, Chief of Staff of Undersecretary of Transportation Carlos Monje, my dear brother, who came to our region just a few months ago, as well as Monica Guerra, the Community Solutions Technical Assistant Lead, for being here. The last thing I'll say is, look, we have 1,000 people moving to Central Florida every week, and we're at about 2.6, 2.7 million folks in our region. My old congressional district was the fastest growing in the nation, according to the census over the last 10 years. And so this infrastructure law has come not a moment too soon to help us to ensure that we can protect our quality of life, protect our commutes, and reduce traffic, reduce air pollution, help ensure clean water, access to internet, access to more resilient energy. And so I couldn't be more thrilled to host this important webinar with the U.S. Department of Transportation to answer your questions so that we can have all the information we need to continue to apply for federal grants from the local level and to work with our state partners. With that, I'll turn it back over to Darren Verde and welcome all of you. We're so thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. That being said, I'd actually like to turn the program right over to our guests from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Coral or Monica, you go ahead and take the lead, whoever wants to start first.
Thank you so much, Darren, and good morning, everyone. And many thanks to Congressman Soto for spearheading amazing efforts and projects in your district. We had a great visit late last year with former Undersecretary Carlos Monje, and we were able to highlight many great work and projects that, thanks to your leadership and the great work of others here today and local stakeholders, we're seeing a lot of progress in infrastructure investments in your regions. But today we have very good information that we want to share with you of some of the new programs that we're implementing here at USDOT. Today here with me is my colleague Monica Guerra, who is our team lead for technical assistance at the department. So just a quick ground rules before we go in depth here in the presentation. We're going to try and leave Q&A for the end of the webinar, but I believe you can add questions in the chat as we cover some of the information we're going to present today. And then if you have applied to any of the programs that we're going to mention here today, and it's an open application period, we unfortunately cannot provide input until the application period closes. But if you have applied and unfortunately have not been successful, we're happy to meet with you and provide a debrief later on. And if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So today we're going to cover a couple of very interesting topics. First and foremost, we're going to give a brief overview of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law, as we call it here in USDOT. Some of you might know it as the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. And then I'm going to provide a little bit of background on some key competitive discretionary programs that can be very beneficial for your region. And we know some of you have applied and have been successful in obtaining funding from us from some of those programs. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Monica, to cover some of the technical assistance resources and tools that can help you through the application process and hopefully with being successful in getting a grant. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Thank you. So let's start with covering what is the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's a historic law that was signed by President Biden on November of 2021. We now have over $1.2 trillion in funding for different agencies across the federal government to provide to stakeholders for infrastructure investments across the country. At USDOT, we have over half of the $1.2 trillion. We have $660 billion that we're currently overseeing, which is historic amounts of funding for USDOT and for the stakeholders that we often work with. And when we talk about transportation, many people usually think of roads and bridges, which is a very important component of the transportation network, right? But there's a lot of other elements that add to the economy and to the movement of people and goods, including public transportation like buses and metro systems, passenger and freight rail systems as well, airports, ports, waterways, right? And there's funding that the bipartisan infrastructure law assigns to all of those different types of modes. One very important thing to highlight is that that has been our traditional business model at USDOT, right? Providing funding for those particular modes. But with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we now also have funding for environmental, climate, and equity-related issues or concerns for transportation needs across the country. So we're very happy that we can now provide funding for resiliency projects, for example. And so far, throughout the work that USDOT has done implementing the law, we have provided over $400 billion in investments across the country on over 40,000 projects across 4,500 communities. So a lot of amazing work happening, but we still have a lot of time and a lot of funding that we need to implement as well. Moving up to the next slide, please. So what does that mean in terms of funding that you can apply for? So in this slide, I think we have some key programs that could be beneficial for your region. And we know that some of you have applied and been successful in getting funding from those. So I'm just going to quickly cover some of the things that you can apply for and you can invest in your infrastructure. So the Bridge Investment Program, for example, it's a new discretionary program in which you can get funding for cathedral type of bridge projects like the Golden Gate Bridge, for example, or smaller projects in your community that need repairs, right? And another particular thing about this program is if you have a series of small bridges, you can submit a proposal or a package for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 bridges to get funding for repair and maintenance of those assets, right? Another important program and a new program at DOT is the Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Grant Program. It's the first time ever that DOT can provide funding to communities across the country to build charging stations, right? This is the wave of the future now. We see there's a lot of changes in, in terms of the vehicles that we see on the roads. And it's important that the public has a safe and reliable infrastructure to be able to charge, their cars wherever they are. Protect discretionary program is the first program that we ever had for resiliency efforts. I mentioned that we now have initiatives under the law that can help with environmental issues or concerns and climate related issues. So if you live in a region that is prone to natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, and other things like that, and your infrastructure is often impacted by those events, you now have an opportunity to apply for funding from us to build more resilient projects so that you don't have to continue to invest in just fixing the projects because of the high frequency of those events happening nowadays. And then we also now have the Reconnecting Communities program, which is an amazing program many years ago when we started building the interstate system in the country, often we didn't make the right decisions in terms of where that infrastructure was being built. And it often divided communities and created issues in terms of quality of life and things like that for people in those communities. So we now have funding to sort of retrofit that infrastructure and help those communities to improve the quality of life with economic development, infrastructure that can provide better access to bicycle, pedestrians, micromobility, things like that. And then moving on, we also have funding for safer streets. Our data shows that there's significant concerns in terms of fatalities and injuries on the roads across the country. And this is a program that is very important to make sure that, again, we can retrofit our streets to better serve the people and in a more efficient and safe manner, right? And then the next three programs are programs that you're probably familiar with, the Mega Race and Infra discretionary programs. Those are what we call our legacy programs. They've been here since before the bipartisan infrastructure law. But we receive additional funding for all of you to apply for. One key thing that I want to highlight, those are very popular programs and often oversubscribed. So if you're thinking of applying for funding for a particular need in your community, I do recommend that you look at those. Those are more targeted, for example, for infrastructure needs in ports, like supply chain issues, like bigger type of projects of infrastructure projects that can be costly. But now, because we have new programs, you can often sort of mix and match the type of funding for the projects that you have planned for your communities. And then last but not least is the SMART program, which is more of a focus on the technological side of the infrastructure, right? We have intelligent transportation systems. We're using AI to better understand traffic patterns and tolling, et cetera. So this is an opportunity for you to get funding for those efforts to improve operational efforts on those ends. So this is just a snapshot of what we're currently working on. There's much more, but we think these are some of the key programs that you all could benefit if you're interested in applying. One more thing that I'm going to mention before moving on is about 60% of the funding that we provide at USDOT, we provide via formula that Congress established via the law, right? So that was the typical business model for us, providing direct funding to state DOTs, for example, transit agencies, airports. And now with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have a new business model where communities, counties, municipalities, nonprofits can apply for that funding in a competitive manner. And these are some of the programs that I just mentioned, right? So this is new. It can be challenging at times, but today we have a lot of good information that can help you navigate the world of applying for some of these programs. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for Florida? So far, the bipartisan infrastructure law has provided over $60 million to the state of Florida for infrastructure investments for over 593 projects across the state. When it comes to roads, bridges, and safety, that's over $8 billion that we have now invested in projects across the state. And also on discretionary programs like RAISE, over $117 million, including $15 million for the city of Tallahassee to purchase electric buses and improve their fleet. And the congressman mentioned former Undersecretary Monge visited the region late last year, and we had a really good opportunity to see some of the investments that are happening. So yeah, we were able to meet with Lennox and see the work that they're doing in terms of upgrading their fleet to electric buses and other facilities that definitely needed infrastructure investments to provide better service and a better quality of life for the people in those communities. And then I also want to mention Protect, because this is, I think, a program that is very important for your region. You often have to deal with floods, hurricanes, and natural events of those sorts. So again, this is a program that it's fitted to those needs. And some of you have already applied and received funding, including $1.75 million for the Osceola County Board to take care of some of the floating issues in the roads in that area. And there's much more. The congressman mentioned a grant that the Orlando Airport received of over $60 million. That's a really important project for many people, including for us at DOT. It's one of our star projects that we highlight, and Secretary Pete Buttigieg actually visited it last year as well. And we're also talking about funding that we provided for Florida for truck parking facilities, for complete street projects, the Corridor ID program, which provides funding for rail infrastructure as well. So many exciting things happening in Florida. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then one of the last things I want to mention is a new program that we have under Bill, which is called the Thriving Communities program. It's a program that it's tailored to smaller communities and agencies that are not familiar with the world of USDOT and how, you know, all of this sort of works. And you can apply for a grant. And the purpose of the program is to provide technical assistance so that we can help you better understand the needs of your communities. We would have a capacity builder that can help you develop plans, do data analyses, and sort of like develop a strategy to better understand what discretionary programs you should apply for. And then later on, also help you with the proposal process. So it has been a very successful program so far. We have over 64 communities across the country that we are currently helping. I visited a couple of those, and my colleague Monica is doing amazing work leading these efforts. So I highly recommend that you apply if you're sort of new to the world of USDOT. Highly successful program as well. Over half of the communities that applied have received at least one USDOT grant so far. So a lot of exciting work happening. Next slide, please. And then for Thriving Communities in Florida, you guys actually have 3 communities that have been awarded Thriving Community grants, including the city of North Miami, who is currently using the funding to better assess the needs of the community for mobility, zoning, and land use, and thinking of maybe doing transit-oriented development to improve the quality of life of the community. The Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization was thinking of a similar initiative, but particularly in areas that have experienced underinvestments. And then the city of Indiantown, who is looking at building a connected communities action plan because of the severe safety issues that they're experiencing in the roadways in that community. So a lot of very important work happening in communities across Florida. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Monica, who's going to cover a lot of really important information about technical assistance and resources and tools. Over to you.
Thank you,
Monica.
Thank you, Coral. So I will be providing a little bit more of getting into a little bit more of the weeds of some of the resources that we have available at DOT that can help you in finding information about these dozens of new discretionary grant funding opportunities. And again, when we talk about discretionary grants, we're referring to funding that's available on a competitive basis. And it is posted through notices of funding opportunities, which you might hear called a NOFO, for a limited time period. Congress authorizes these programs and establishes the key program requirements, such as the funding amount, who's eligible to apply, what it can be used for, whether there's a federal match, and other factors. And it's really important to remember that each notice of funding opportunity, so NOFO, is unique. So each time that one comes out, you have to read it carefully to make sure you understand all the different requirements. Okay. So USDOT launched the DOT Navigator. The website link is here on the bottom left in the year 2022 to provide a place, what we call a one-stop shop, to access the myriad of technical assistance resources available across the department. It provides a library of resources to navigate the grant application process. And when I say technical assistance, what that means is basically resources and support to help access federal opportunities. Technical assistance comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some are toolkits and guidance documents, which you can find on this website. Others, like our Thriving Communities program or our Rural and Tribal Assistance program, actually funds capacity builders or consultants to provide targeted technical assistance. And then we have others like the local transportation assistance programs funded by federal highways that serve as clearinghouses and can also provide local trainings. On the DOT Navigator homepage, you can access the technical assistance database that includes literally hundreds of resources on all sorts of topics, from civil rights and small business development to transportation planning, project delivery, and electric vehicle deployment, to name just a few. This database is updated monthly. If you're ever searching for technical assistance but not finding it, you can also email us at usdotassist@dot.gov. As part of that website, you will find a DOT discretionary grant database. This is specific to the grants. This was launched in 2023. It's a searchable database of all federal transportation grant programs, including those offered across federal agencies. The dashboard enables you to filter the type of project, the type of place, whether you're rural, urban. You can also filter to check whether there's a federal match requirement or not, or if there's a tribal or rural set aside. Most DOT grant programs require a 20% non-federal match, but some do provide waivers. If you want to learn more about match requirements, you can also visit the DOT Navigator funding section, where we provide an overview and list the programs that include some type of waiver. Again, and I'll say this a couple of different times, it's really important to make sure to read through the NOFO because it really does tell you what are eligible uses for the funding, who can apply. It tells you deadlines and information about in-kind matches, federal matches, and things of that sort. Grants.gov is the federal website that posts all open grant opportunities. And most grants require that you submit your application through grants.gov. One note there, to submit an application, you must be registered, and that process can sometimes take a few weeks because you have to get something called a unique identifier number. So just a reference, if you are intending on applying, you can get that project of that process of registering in right away. If you want more information on grants.gov, you can also find that at the DOT Navigator. So one of the best ways to prepare for future funding opportunities is to keep in mind when notices of a funding opportunity are coming out. Recommend that you bookmark this page. It's a page that actively tells you about what opportunities are coming up, what the closing dates are, what is the operating administration that is managing the specific NOFO, and the opening date or projected opening date for that funding opportunity. Again, this is something that you can calendar as your favorites on your own computers. I wanted to flag a few of the key open grant opportunities today at USDOT. Note that there's many others that are available. We have the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program. It's going to provide up to $45 million in grants to plan, design, and construct eligible projects to provide safe and connected active transportation activities as part of an active transportation network or active transportation spine. Those are due on June the 17th. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program, over $3 billion between 2024 and 2026. There's two remaining deadlines on that one Implementation grant applications must be submitted by Thursday, May the 16th, and the planning and demonstration grant applicants, which is a separate process, have two remaining deadlines, one on May the 16th and one on August the 29th. We also have an Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant Program. It's a new program. The NOFO is closing on May the 10th, and a Port Infrastructure Development Program. That's a $450 million to ports in both urban and rural areas for planning and capital projects. That one is also due on May 10th. Will be coming up soon. For these last two, it might be too late to apply for this round, but keep them in mind for future funding rounds. So the DOT Navigator also includes a library of resources that you can click to read online. Many of these are also translated into Spanish. We're working on translating a number of those documents, continuing to translate a number of those documents. If there's a grant program you're currently interested in and it's not currently open, you can also check back here to look at past NOFOs and get a sense of what the requirements are and how you can best prepare for a future funding round. In the next few slides, I'm going to spotlight a couple of the Navigator tools designed to help prepare successful grant applications. So we've developed a number of checklists and facts documents to help decode the grant process. Again, we recognize that sometimes people, they go through a NOFO and there's just things that don't make sense. So part of what we've created here are 1 or 2 two-page documents to help you figure out what do they mean when they're talking about funding and match requirements, or what do they mean when they're talking about applying for climate change dollars. So I think this is a really good place to start for general resources. When you pursue a federal grant, keep in mind that the persons reviewing your grant application may not be familiar with your community, and often they're not. So using data can help you to tell a compelling story and provide facts that reinforce the important need and the benefits that the proposed project will have on your community. So when you go through a NOFO and you check to see what the requirements are for using data, you can come back here to find various tools that can help you figure out how to tell that story. In some instances, the program NOFO may identify specific federal data sets that have to be used to inform your application. But in some other instances, particularly in rural and tribal communities, federal data may not be enough to tell the story of what's happening in your community. Always check the NOFO, but in many cases, you can supplement federal data with local and state data or anecdotal information to help paint a picture of what the challenges in your community are, the demographics, and the potential benefits that a proposed project can bring. So we've already mentioned federal match requirements, but I did want to raise this again since we know that it can be a common source of confusion for project sponsors. The DOT Navigator includes information on match requirements, but as noted, read the NOFO for that current year's program to get the most up-to-date information. In most instances, you will not need to have this funding secured until the time of grant obligation, but it can take several months or even a year or more to reach that point of grant obligation. Local or state situations may vary from place to place, so it's important to consider how you will secure your identified match. Finally, 2 important deadlines to consider, or to check rather, when you're considering applying for funding. The first one is obligation deadline. This is the date by which a grant recipient must have all necessary environmental approvals and other federal requirements completed to execute the grant. The expenditure deadline is the date by which all grant funding must be expended. So when considering submission of an application, consider whether your project, but also your organization is ready to be able to meet these dates because they are important. Again, for more information on project readiness, please check out our DOT Navigator checklist resources. The strongest grant applications are for projects that can comfortably be completed within the grant's financial deadlines. This is often considered as part of project readiness. So we have a checklist on project readiness to help you walk through that process with your partners of, are we ready to submit this application? If you're applying, as part of that checklist, we say there's 6 steps. First, you want to complete the transportation planning process to set up your project for success. 2, you want to plan for completion of environmental review and permitting requirements. Don't wait to get awarded to do this. 3, consider your project's civil rights compliance, equity considerations, and potential outcomes. 4, ensure you have the ability to secure that non-federal share according to the program's requirements identified in the NOFO, if applicable. Again, do this early on. 5, ensure your organization has sound project management systems and sufficient staffing. And 6, develop a clear plan for project financing and management of the grant. Again, 6 basic steps, but critical to making sure that once you are awarded a grant, you are able to carry it through execution. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to share a few specialized transportation technical assistance resources. The U.S. Department of Transportation Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, we call it OSDBU. Their mission is to ensure that small business policies and goals of the Secretary of Transportation are implemented in a fair, efficient, and effective manner. They have established small business transportation resource centers as part of a network of grantees across the country. These work closely with transportation and with the transportation contracting community and other TA providers to serve small disadvantaged transportation businesses. They offer a variety of technical assistance to small and disadvantaged businesses, making the businesses more competitive when bidding on DOT procurement opportunities and federally funded contracts. So in comparison to what we've talked about earlier today, not state DOTs, not MPOs, not specific communities, but these are small businesses that are applying. This is a great resource for potential procurement opportunities. These resource centers offer services including business analysis, market research, general management and technical assistance, business counseling and coaching, outreach, conference participation, even access to capital and surety bond assistance. We also have an important document called the Promising Practices for Meaningful Public Involvement in Transportation Decision Making. This document is an important resource in thinking about how you engage with community and is an important part of many grant opportunities. It provides promising practices which can promote meaningful public involvement at each stage of the transportation decision-making process. The document was last updated in November 2023, and we're regularly trying to update best practices and cases from the field to sort of show what are people doing in terms of meaningful public involvement. Finally, want to point to a few specific technical assistance programs in our Build America Bureau, which is where the Thriving Communities program sits. These programs fund technical assistance and advisory services to support project development at all phases of the project cycle, from visioning to execution. So on the visioning side, we have programs like the Thriving Communities program and the Rural and Tribal Assistance program. On more of the execution side, we have the Innovative Finance and Asset Concessions program and the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator. These are not capital grants, but they offer a variety of technical assistance and advisory services to support you at those early stages of thinking about projects and starting them to move them forward. With that, I am going to turn it back to Coral.
Thank you very much, Monica, for all that great information. One key thing that she mentioned is the distinction between a planning and a capital grant. So I want to make sure we remind everyone of that. That planning grant is money for non-construction efforts, let's just put it that way. And then a capital grant is when you're ready to actually build the project. That's the money that will be assigned for the construction of the project. So moving on to the next slide, please. Monica presented a lot of really good information, new resources that are new at the department. It's a lot of new competitive and discretionary programs. Some of you might be new to all of this. So these are really, really good resources that can help you navigate everything you need to know when applying, right? And that's step one of the process, applying. The ultimate goal is to build the project, right? So when it comes to project delivery, we also acknowledge the importance of providing technical assistance on that end, because it can also be complicated to navigate once you receive the funding, like the different steps of making sure that the infrastructure can be built efficiently. So we now have a new office for project delivery with amazing people that have experience from all over the country. And one of the efforts that they're working on right now is the Center of Excellence, which provides a lot of good resources like webinars and information online, similar to what Monica just mentioned. And the key thing is just to highlight the case studies, best case scenarios of communities like yours that have gone through this process and have effectively completed a project. So this is a good way for you to learn from others. We have mayors from different parts of the country that have provided their input on how the first time ever that they're working with DOT and the success of delivering the projects in their cities or regions. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Some of the other information that you can also find there, right? It's information about the risk management of the process of, constructing the project, construction considerations, project management, financing. Many of these programs require match from your end, right? Making sure that you understand other ways of financing, the full extent of the project. So definitely a really good resource. You should check it out when you have a moment. And if we can go to the next slide. The last portion that we're going to cover is an initiative called Routes, which is pretty much a focus primarily to rural communities across the country. So it's something similar to the Thriving Communities program, but again, with a focus on particularly rural parts of the country. And it also is more of a whole of government approach from our end, from the federal sector, because those regions can cover, a vast amount of area, and they have different challenges and complexities. And we want to make sure that from our end, we can help those communities fully understand how the different federal resources can work together for benefiting those rural communities. So if your community fits the definition of rural under the census, then you can definitely also take advantage of this technical assistance efforts that we can provide here. And then the last slide is just our contact information. In case you have any questions, Monica and myself are available to cover more information now. But please check our websites. There's a lot of good information. All of the programs that I mentioned, we have fact sheets that include the eligibilities, the amount of funding per year, the types of projects that you can build with the funding for that particular program. So there's tons of really good information, and we always have people at your disposal for any questions you might have. So that's all we have for today, Darren. So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to go over questions.
Thank you again. With that,